So
Yes, I hear you. So the first,
okay,
yeah.
so let me back up for just a moment because I was saying a few things
Oh,
and I
okay.
didn't know that you couldn't hear me.
Okay.
I was just curious as to like when you like started your channel, like what inspired you to start it and things
Okay.
along those lines.
Okay. So I was anti-feminist since the first time I heard about feminism, which would be probably maybe even 17 years ago or so. So a very long time ago, right?
Okay.
I started off being anti feminist from the traditional perspective, so as a traditionalist. However, I was never anti anything LGBTQ. So I was probably like, I felt like I was a traditionalist, but I always said tradition got things wrong with the LGBTQ community. So I was always like, how do I put it? I was always like, okay, I'll give my perspective. My perspective then was I think that that feminism was too harsh on traditional society in the sense that feminism always said that it was a social construct and that this social construct was of course bad towards women. And I felt like actually no, it wasn't just a social construct. It was something that came from nature, in the sense that like natural forces sort of pressured society in order to build these constructs, and the constructs were, of course, unfair to women and men and the LGBT community and many different groups. It was unfair because of the diversity within humans. It would never fit for everyone, and so on and so on and so on. However, the blame cannot be like put on society or put on men or just like put on it being a social construct. I feel like it was from nature and that it worked with our nature. When I first started as an anti-feminist, I was probably more traditional than I am now, in that I really felt, I suppose what I want to say is I was more close minded, in that I really felt that, well, men and women are just like that. And yes, LGBTQ people exist, but that's like just a separate corner. And that the majority of men and women, it fits, right? But now I'm like more open minded, in that I more think actually that it's not that men and women are like that. I think there's, just like you have diversity, there will be a small subsect of men and women who are like that, but most people are very fluid and can probably fit into this society or that society, you know? There is diversity in that on one end you have people who need a more liberal feminist society where women, and then on the other end you have people who need what is traditionalism, but most people are just pretty fluid and can adapt to whatever is the society of the day and stuff like this. I'm still an anti-feminist, because okay, so my perspective started off with traditionalism, but then I also see that even for non-traditional people, anti-feminism is unfair to men. I mean, sorry, feminism itself is unfair to men because it doesn't really, it's not really equality. So I understand that perspective. But if I'm being honest, this wasn't where my anti-feminism came from, because I wasn't really concerned with equality. I was just concerned with the fact that they misrepresented traditionalism in my point of view. But I support people who want equality, and I support this viewpoint that if you do, so I'm kind of like in the space where I say, okay, if it is that society has to be egalitarian based because this is what the majority of people want, I agree with democracy, so I agree with that, then do it, but do it right. So don't like if we want egalitarianism, I'm okay with an egalitarian society. I support it. I would, yeah, but then make it actually egalitarian and actually equality based, but not, you know, not fake egalitarianism, which is sort of like female privilege when you want it, but equality when you don't, or whatever, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Okay, so how did you become a non feminist woman?
Well, to me, feminism has always seemed like one of those things that's almost like a cult mentality, where it seems as though you have to believe these sorts of things, these sorts of rules, and if you ever stray away from that, then you are shunned and you are an outcast from that. So, from my perspective, when I have seen some of that mentality, when I've seen some of that form of thinking, I'm someone who's a free thinker, so I never really fit into any sort of box personally. So for me, when I have seen that, when I have seen people be in this same thinking mindset, I tend to be very against that. And that's basically how it started, to be against something that was almost like a cult mentality.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, are there? Okay, let me see. I have to look at the questions properly. Yeah. Do you believe that we live in a patriarchy?
I would say not really. I think maybe a long, long time ago, possibly many years ago, possibly there could have been more of male dominated society. However, I think now there are plenty of opportunities that women have that they're able to. I don't want to say do everything that a man can do, because there's plenty of differences, not just with the actual physical body of men and women. They're incapable of doing certain things here and there, but for the most part, I would say women do have the right or the ability to do certain things that men can do, but still, I would say to some degree, it is still more male run to some degree. So maybe like partially, but not fully.
Okay. Okay. Um. Okay. What are your thoughts on traditional gender roles?
Well, this is something that is very interesting coming from a transgender individual such as myself, because I have experienced both male and female, and I have noticed how people interact differently
Mm-hmm.
to me as a male, me as a female. And I would say that they certainly have their place, the traditional roles, because some of the roles do make perfect sense. They fall in alignment with how men and women are, and how they are very different when it comes to their physical bodies being very different. Like, men are going to be far stronger than women can possibly really ever be, unless the woman is taking steroids or taking testosterone, whereas a woman tends to be more emotional. So I think when you view it from an aspect of these traditional gender roles of what a man should do and what a female should do, there is some truth to a lot of those types of theories, a lot of those types of outcomes that people are actually experiencing there. That they actually there there is a lot of truth. Is basically what I'm trying to say. That, yeah.
Okay, that is based on something. There's some basis.
For word there, yeah.
There's some basis for it.
Okay.
May not. Yeah. Okay. What are your thoughts on men's rights activists?
Men's right activists. I think in the society that we live in now, it seems as though men are very shunned from society. There's a lot of things that target men that are very negative.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to just even some of the biological and physical aspects when it comes to certain foods that we can consume that interfere with our hormones and can actually lower testosterone levels and increase estrogen levels. These phytoestrogens in plants or xenoestrogens in plastics and things along those lines. And I feel as though men have certainly been shunned by society in recent times. So I think when it comes to men's rights activists, I think that there's a lot of validity there when it comes to them feeling shunned and them wanting to feel as though they have the right place, just as women do. Women have every right to, have women's rights activists, men's rights activists, and it's just, I think men tend to have it worse because of the society that we currently live in, that they're being shunned. So I don't personally have any sort of problem with them. I can't really necessarily know that I have seen any men's rights activists or really know 100% of what they stand for.
Okay.
However, I don't think that it's necessarily a problem.
Okay. Do you have an opinion on gynocentrism? Do you think women or men have it easier? Do you think society is more focused on women than men, or anything like this?
I would say, this is a very interesting one, that men and women have very different challenges in life, and both of them, I would say, are in a way equally difficult, but in very different ways. I feel as though, as we mentioned, when it comes to like men and testosterone, and, that like the strength that men have, that tends to be shunned in a way that it's like, oh, you're too manly, or it's like men do not cry, or things along those lines. That just, it makes them, it brings them down. It makes it harder for them, and not in addition, there's certain aspects of just life in general that women tend to have a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the flip side, women also have it much harder when it comes to a variety of other aspects. Like they certainly are not as strong, so they cannot fight back as easily as a man could.
Mm-hmm.
In addition, people tend to not take women as seriously as men. If you have a female who is in charge of something, or who is the head of something, or even just in a government official who is a female, they tend to be taken far less seriously than men do. So I feel as though the challenges that both men and women have, they are very different challenges, but they're both comparable in very different ways.
Okay. Yeah. So what would be at the core of your non-feminism? What would you change about feminism if you wanted to make it, if you wanted to call yourself a feminist? What would you change about feminism?
I would say that because I am against that type of cult mentality where everyone has to think and believe the same exact thing, I think the major thing would be that to allow an open discussion of different ideas, different beliefs. Just because someone thinks a little differently doesn't mean that they should be shunned from a certain movement. So if someone is a feminist, if they have to follow all this criteria to a T, I take a major problem with that. And I think that should be something that should change, because I don't think feminism has to be something that is so negative to the point where it is often frowned upon. I think it could be something that could be very positive. It just has to do away with a lot of the negativity, a lot of the moving of thinking that women are
a hive,
so insuperior to men, and just viewing life in a very much more positive way. I've always feel as though it's very negative.
Right. Okay. What are some of the things that feminists say that you think that you disagree with, that you don't like, in terms of that they want everyone to agree with?
Well, there's quite a few things. I would say one of the things being that men and women are equal.
Right.
I think that we are all equal to some degree, like as human beings. However, men and women are very different. Very different from a biological perspective, what they're capable of doing, what their interests are.
Right.
Men and women are very, very different. Like you're often not going to see a woman who is an electrician or a plumber. That is, or a contractor. Those are mostly jobs that men have. That's not to say that a woman couldn't have that, but and it's the same way the other way around. Men are very different, and they're not going to do certain jobs that only women are interested in. So I think one of the major problems is that men and women are equal in a way.
And I think this
and the other
also, sorry, I think this is also interesting. I had this idea before from a transgender perspective, only because I always say in my head, kind of, it's not a very well thought out thing, but it seems like if the right, let's say the right, I'm just using these words, right? The more conservative people say men and women are not the same, but at the same time, they don't believe that transgenderism is real, right? And then the other side is saying men and women are the same, but they believe transgenderism is real. And I always find this to be a little bit of a contradiction, in that if men and women are not the same, then it makes sense that something like transgenderism can exist, because men and women are not the same. And what this person is saying is that possibly they have the brain of associated with women or men, because they are not exactly the same. But I just wanted to add that in. But okay, you go ahead now.
Yes, you're absolutely right about that. You're
Mm-hmm.
absolutely right. Yeah, it's men and women are indeed different. I mean, just from all sorts of aspects, and that is what is very important to realize in society, that men and women are different, and that leads to the other point that I have a problem with when it comes to feminism. It's with any of those sorts of groups, the first thing is that they view themselves in a very lowly state. They feel as though they are a victim in society, that they need more power and more rights because they are shunned by society. So certainly plenty of feminists will believe that they are the minority, they are the outcasts, they are the ones that are shunned by society. And when we take a look at the grander picture of everything, it's not just women who are shunned, it's also men who are shunned. They're all shunned.
Right,
Everyone is shunned.
and this is
that's
how
how society is.
right, and this is also how cults work in a sense, or how many ideologies work, in that they say to you, you are the victim, and that person is the bad one, and therefore, this is how they gain followers, because they make you feel as though you're a victim. When you're a victim, you can get away with anything. And many different ideologies and cults work in this way by saying, you are the victim, we feel sorry for you, we can see your struggle. And it's only because everyone has struggles. So, of course, in your world, you are a victim because you see your struggles while you can't see the struggles of the other person. So, yes, you're going to believe them because they're saying that they see your struggles. Yeah, women have struggles, but as you said, men have struggles as well. So it's not like you are uniquely a victim. It's just that, this group is telling you you're a victim and that they see your problems because they want something from you, which is support, for their
Exactly.
ideology. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly how a lot of the people get brought into it, because they tend to be in a very negative state about
Right.
themselves, and then they hear this, like, here's what can make you feel empowered. Here's what can give you a purpose.
And they hear
based on
it's
how
not
you feel.
your fault, because so many things go wrong in relationships, at work, and everything, and then they say, well, it's not your fault, it's bigger than you. And everybody wants to believe that because no one wants to put the blame on themselves. And I'm not saying that the answer is to put the blame on themselves, but I'm just saying everybody loves that sort of out to say, yeah, it's not my fault, I'm just a victim of society, this is much bigger than me, it's absolutely not my fault. But it doesn't mean that that is the truth. The truth is often really complicated. It's like, maybe parts are not your fault, but it's not necessarily that other guy's fault either. It's more complicated. So, yeah. Okay. What do you think are the biggest issues that face men and women today?
I would say the biggest issues that face men and women, I feel as though it is a lot of bombardment with all sorts of ideas that are very negative in nature.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be that when it comes to like feminism being brought down, being very shunned by society, or men even just being very 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 shunned, very very negative mindset. And I feel as though we are bombarded on a day-to-day basis with so much things that are so negative for us personally.
But men specifically,
then
let's take it. There's two separate questions. What do you feel? What faces men? What is the biggest issue that men face?
What is the biggest issue that men face? Okay, I would say it's probably, we kind of discussed a little bit when it comes to the shunning of men in society. Like you can't really, they don't really feel like they can really be themselves. Like if a man cannot express their emotions, or they're not allowed to express certain emotions here and there, or they're shunned in certain ways, that it's like a man did that, or things along those lines. I guess it's
Okay.
I don't know exactly. Yeah, I feel as though I have kind of answered that with a few of the other things that I've interjected.
Okay.
I don't know.
No. I see what you're saying. You think that men's issue is the way they are treated by society, and they're not really, loved in a way that they are free. I think.
Exactly. Yeah, I feel as though they have to do more hiding of themselves. So I would say both men and women in general do have to live up to a certain standard based on what society says. So
Right.
with with men, if you're not this particular way, then you're not a man, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then when you do follow those things and you do become a man, then you're often shunned. It's like, well, you're just a man. Who really cares what you have to say? Especially, it's the society that we live in, especially if you're a white man, even, it's someone who's even more shunned by society.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And feminism has played a role in this.
Absolutely, because it's more about shunning the men and then bringing up the women to make the women feel better and make them feel more superior to men.
Right.
And that's how it is. It's not about being on equal playing ground. It's about the women being better than the men. The women are the one who are in control of the men, which technically that's really not how it is usually.
Right, because they put themselves in this sort of victim class, and therefore to correct this great injustice, we have to bring the woman up. So they use the sort of pity of society to elevate women, but at the same time, men didn't get that pity. But men also have issues that we didn't notice or talk about. If we talk about traditional society, of course, women had issues, but men did too. It's just that maybe men's issues wasn't verbalized as much. They didn't talk about it as much. So
exactly, yeah. There's a lot of hiding, like even just of emotions and their ability to really communicate. It's basically like men don't talk about these things, and I think it's important to have conversations if you are going through any sort of emotional problems.
Right. Okay. And for women, what do you think are the biggest issues facing women today? The same thing, or?
I would say very similar, but also a little different as well. Where, as I kind of mentioned, like women are not taken as seriously as men are.
Yeah.
For a variety of different reasons. Like if you see, I think it's because women lack, the physical strength that men have. I think that could be one of the aspects. It could be a woman's voice is much higher, and it doesn't persuade that type of conviction that a deeper man's voice would, or things along those lines. But I just know based on my experience, going from male to female, that is one of the biggest challenges that I have faced. It just not being taken as seriously.
Okay.
Not so that tends to be what I have viewed from my perspective.
Okay. And like as a trans woman, how do you feel treated by society? Do you feel that society accepts you, or how do you feel in general?
I would say for the most part, I don't. I feel as though I am accepted by everyone around me. My family, my friends accept me. The places that I've gone out, I've never heard any sort of negative things when it comes to transgender people, and I'm very fortunate of that. I'm very thankful for that, and I think society as a whole, I think for the most part, do accept transgender people. I don't think that they have a problem with that. It's just the whole problem of how politicized it has become over the past several years that has steered it in a very different direction.
I do feel like it got so much worse within the past 10 years online. I mean, it was probably always never great. I'm not going to say that society was there where they were all accepting. It wasn't great, but it seems to have gotten worse. And it seems to be because the politics, it seems like it has become a sort of conservative or right-wing thing to basically disagree with trans, and I don't really understand why or how that actually happened, or because I guess I wasn't paying attention when it happened, so I don't know like where it came from. Yeah. Do you have any idea where it came from?
Yeah, I would basically say, so I transitioned a little over 10 years ago, and this was not a political thing back then. It was very, very minor that you would hear various, things on the news about transgender people, or, things along those lines. It was very, very minor. And that's technically how it should be, because transgender people are a very, very, very small minority of people. It's a fraction of the population is transgender, and that's just how it is. It's extremely rare. However, it got to a point where you have Democrats that are pushing for, very, very strong legislation to protect trans people to the point now where if you're a kid, if you're a very young kid, the school can basically give you puberty blockers and transition you without the need for parental consent. And that is gone just too far. And then on the other end, the more Republican conservative side, well, they go much further as well. They see what the Democrats are doing going way over here, so they do the same thing to retaliate, to ban certain things, ban certain procedures, to stop people from transitioning. So it's really been a dual effort here, one going to the extreme one end this way, another going to the extreme end this way. And it's something that should not have happened. And I think it really revolves around the kids transitioning. I think that is where the big highlight and the big issue has all come into play. If you're under the age of 18, are you able to transition medically or surgically, stopping puberty? I think that is where a lot of the politics started to get involved.
Okay, so I noticed because for me, I was heavily involved in anti-feminism. Then I left, I stopped being involved, and now I'm trying to come back into it, right? So I know that, like, anti-feminism, the majority of anti-feminists are conservatives. So this trans issue is sort of a big deal there. And because the majority are conservative, then they lean away from. Does this affect you as someone who is non-feminist and also a transgender woman? Do you feel like the anti-feminist community has failed you or something like this, or not really?
I would say no. If anything, it's more so the people who are feminists that I have heard from that basically said, well, you're not a real woman, so you can't talk about this subject.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to the more conservative side. Certainly I've received plenty of comments and everything online, especially from people who are not feminist at all, who are more conservative, who have said things. But I would say I have not noticed personally any sort of people who are anti-feminist who have brought concerns about me being trans personally.
Okay. So the issue is on the feminist side, because there are also, of course, feminists who, yes, totally disagree. And also within anti-feminist world, I noticed a lot of women who have turned to the anti-feminist side, and they say, well, they were feminists, they agree with everything, but they are upset with feminism for including trans women, and so because they don't believe that trans women are women. So this is, some feminists do feel that way. And you feel that this has been hurtful?
Yeah, I would say that the people who are the feminists that I have heard from that basically say, if they're women's rights activists and everything, that they will say that I am not a real woman.
Yeah.
And I understand that to a degree, because I don't, deal with the same things that a biological woman would. It is very different. Absolutely. So I understand that, but it's not necessarily something that you really need to bring out or call out. I mean, you can keep that to yourself.
Right. And also the point of feminism, as they say, is equality. It is supposed to be an inclusive movement and inclusive of all people, trying to bring equality between all people. So absolutely they should be inclusive of transgender people. I mean, all movements that would want something good and want equality between people should be inclusive. So I definitely think that, well, feminism and both anti-feminism should be inclusive of trans women or men. And I think the women who do complain about trans women not being real women, I mean, okay, as you said, trans women are trans women. Maybe you know, if you want to make this distinction and not call them real women, fine. But yeah, I don't see how it helps anybody. I don't see what would be the point other than to be mean. And why would we do that in society? What would be the point of,
Yeah, there really is no point. It's basically just about more segregation and more
just being mean. Really, there's nothing else but to be just to be a mean because. And then the people who complain about the bathrooms, this is ridiculous because, I mean, I don't understand it. What are they afraid of? Nothing is going to happen in a public bathroom. First of all, it's a public bathroom. And if you are afraid of your children in a public bathroom, go to the bathroom with your children. You should be afraid of women as well, right? Because, apparently we're all the same. Women are just as dangerous as men, but suddenly men are the more dangerous ones as soon as they dress as women. It's all very, very strange,
It is. It is. It's crazy, and that brings up another good point when it comes to transgender people. Like, I mean, that's a whole nother topic in itself. Like, transgender people, are they dangerous? All this sort of stuff, and it's a very similar type of idea that it's just not true. Some
like
people are like that, absolutely, but it's not everyone.